Ever since the release of 5th edition, 2nd edition... Really? Is that official? D&D Beyond said that? No way. How about that? They're calling it 5.5 now. I had a good running gag going. I call it 5th edition, 2nd edition. Ha ha ha. They can't just steal it from me now. Okay, let's talk about communication in the RPG space, how it works and why it's so important. Because I think basically any hobby lives and dies on official communication, and for the first time in forever, we've got a lot of good signs from the folks running D&D. And I think there is something that very online people, like you and me, are constantly forgetting about the RPG hobby. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where I don't do D&D news, but I wanted to make an exception this week. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over 11 years. If you're as active on the D&D side of YouTube as I am, you would have seen the designers, producers, and team leads of D&D doing the rounds on some of your favorite podcasts. D&D Beyond leads Brian Perry and Zach Cohn went on both the Ghostfire Gaming podcast and the Mastering Dungeons podcast, and they talked with Ted from Nerdiversion to have a frank conversation about the future of D&D Beyond as a platform. That came on the back of a series of blog posts they posted on their website talking transparently about the need for a back-end rebuild, something I've talked before on the channel. I'm all for a big back-end rebuild. If they get that down, I might actually return to the website one day in the future. And by the sound of it, they're already fixing parts of the website, like the new front end, which fixed the library tab to a certain degree. So you can now favorite sources to have them show up. I think that's a big fix. Instead of showing you, new books all the time, you can have the ones you use available in front of you. Still, I think there's a lot left to do. Search is frankly still busted, which is one of my biggest gripes. Like, if you search firebolt as one word, it still won't get you the spell firebolt, 2 words. Or more egregiously, when searching for how a potion of healing works in 5.5, something that's in the free rules, you need to scroll past 22 other entries before you get to the SRD potion of healing in the Dungeon Master's Guide, with every entry between that and the first result being entries from other modules, which are basically ads for products you need to buy. A confused first-time player might not know there's a free version of the potion of healing and might end up buying one of these many starter sets out of pure confusion and ad volume. But they've said they're fixing it, so I'm gonna stop harping on it right there. They labeled the 2024 edition of the books as 5.5 because that's what most people were calling it anyway. Me included, except for when I poked fun by calling it 5th edition, 2nd edition. But there has been more communication from the team. For example, Ted from Nerd Immersion hosted a State of the Game with 4 leads from D&D, not D&D Beyond, D&D, including both game design director Justice Armand, who I think does excellent design work. I'm a big fan of Heroes of the Borderlands, and the newish executive producer Greg Bilsland, who I remember being very excited about joining the team. That guy used to host all kinds of live streams back when 5th edition was still in its infancy, and I think he deserves some praise. Greg Bilsland said in Ted's video,
"The big priorities for us is engaging the community. That's why we're here with you, Ted.
Engaging with the community." I think that's a laudable goal. I think one of D&D's biggest blunders of 2025 was the total lack of communication. I mean, the last time they posted an update about their game on their YouTube channel was 8 months ago, about the arcane subclasses Unearthed Arcana. Hell, they even booted Todd Kendrick. They lost a lot of key staff last year, and I think we have to assume that things are a bit upside down over at WotC. And with a corporation that size, it takes time to course correct. But from everything I'm hearing, I'm really starting to like the new team that's coming together, at least based on their credits. I don't know any of them. Justice Armand is an incredible designer, and I'm an outspoken fan of Joey Hake, and I think they'll both bring a new sensibility to the game, something I'm looking forward to. Books that were released at the tail end of last year were presumably long in the making, and the new staff likely didn't have much input on those books already in distribution. Which explains this chart where all the books are stacked on the back end of 2026, likely to give the new design team that's been built the time needed to put something new together. So it's a new year, and they're making an active decision to be more visible, more communicative, and more open. And I think that's great. But I know it's also a conceit that's really only needed to communicate with you and me, us very online people. Let's put a pin in that idea, very online people. But the communication is working on me. It fills my soul with hope for the game that I love playing. Speaking of filling my soul with hope, have you seen the Kickstarters that are launching these days? This one, Kibbles Compendium of Airships and Artifacts, is the sponsor of today's video. And look at it! It's 250 pages, bringing 5e and 5.5 to the skies and beyond. It's got 2 new classes, the Paragon and the Summoner. Damn it. Kibbles beat me to it again. If you're not familiar, I'm telling you, this is one of the OG third-party classes designers. And he didn't stop there. It's got more than 30 new subclasses, a dozen feats, spells, and more. And a new system for airships that you can build, fight, and adventure with. A system for creating artifacts that level up with you, and a modular crafting expansion to boot. You didn't know when to stop. Do yourself a massive favor and go check out Kibbles Tasty's Compendium of Airships and Artifacts on Kickstarter right now. I'll put a link in the description. Which brings me to a certain point, actually. There's a lot of 5e Kickstarters, and they seem to be doing okay for themselves. Where's all the Kickstarters for third-party content for other systems? I mean, they exist, but there's a lot fewer of them. And that question kept bouncing around in my head, and then I had a conversation with a game designer. A couple of months ago, I was talking about wanting to do, one day, publish a hardcover book for my own campaign setting on a stream. And RPG designer Sean Knitter reached out to me and sent me an article that I wanted to talk about. It's kind of why I made this video. It's a piece written by Aaron Marks at CannibalHalflingGaming.com, and it's about revenue in the tabletop RPG gaming industry. In particular, it's highlighting the sheer size of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Dungeons and Dragons. And it got me thinking. We all know that D&D is the biggest in the space. That much is evident. No matter whatever anybody's online telling you about sales numbers or anything, it is obvious D&D is an 800-pound gorilla. But I'm gonna ask you a question without you looking it up. If you had to guess, how much bigger is D&D compared to the second largest publisher, Paizo? The folks who make Pathfinder and Starfinder. Just in terms of pure revenue, how much bigger would you guess? I'm about to spoil it, but make a guess. I asked my players, and some said double or triple the size, maybe quadruple the size. One of them guessed 10 times bigger. That's the correct number, at least according to Aaron Marks. Estimated revenue for D&D was at around $500 million annually, whereas Paizo is estimated to be around 50. Of course, that D&D revenue includes branded dice, mini spell cards, and I think other tie-ins like Baldur's Gate, not just book sales. And the Paizo estimate includes the same terrain minis, Starfinder and Pathfinder, and I think tie-ins like their video games, Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous. And then, on a tier below Paizo, you've got Mongoose Publishing and Chaosium sort of crossing the bridge into a third tier of TTRPG publishing, which is something along the lines of Steve Jackson Games, bringing in about $5 million annually. Those are the people who make Munchkin, GURPS, Discworld, etc. In that similar bracket, you'll find publishers like Cubicle 7, Magpie, Free League, Onyx Path, those folks. And a tier below that, at less than $1 million annually, you've got more indie publishers like Evil Hat or your favorite Kickstarter RPG you backed. And below that tier is everyone else. So if you factor those figures out like a pie chart, it starts to look a bit like this. D&D is an 800-pound gorilla in any room that's discussing RPGs, which is why we, the people on the internet, the very online people, are always talking about it. But it's got a lot of other side effects. A common sentiment I see online is that, and I quote, 5e is so bad, which is why the community has to fix everything, which I think is a classic case of correlation not necessarily equaling causation. I mean, there's a lot of 5e expansions now promising ship combat rules because they weren't in Spelljammer. Sometimes 5e really does drop the ball and the community has to pick it up. But you've got to remember the 800-pound gorilla. If you're a TTRPG designer and you want to make third-party content, and you're currently trying to decide between if your product should work with D&D or Pathfinder, picking Pathfinder means you're cutting your potential revenue by 90%, at least if those sales numbers I showed you earlier are anything to go by. Of course, that's not literally true because D&D's revenue is inflated by tie-ins and Pathfinder's community is more online than D&D's. But there are so many D&D players who never watch YouTube, TikTok, they never buy third-party products. Hell, they never buy official products. But the point remains that any third-party creator is likely to sell more copies if they're making stuff for D&D compared to something like Blades in the Dark. And if you're going to make an add-on for Blades in the Dark, you're probably going to make more money if you just make a new RPG instead. No need to make it a mod unless you really have to. I'm not trying to pick on Blades in the Dark for any reason. Forgive me, Sean. But that's kind of why there are so many powered by the Apocalypse style games. They are all building off of the same design principles, but not literally mods for one another. Same is true for the OSR. It's the same pool of mechanics that everyone is playing around with. And it's why there are fewer third-party Pathfinder supplements. Not because those designers are so touched by the gods that there isn't anything left for the community to fix. Again, not to pick on Pathfinder or their designers, forgive me, Mark Seifter. Those folks made a hugely popular game that lots of people truly love. Clearly, they're doing something very right. If they hadn't, they wouldn't be the second best-selling tier of RPG designers. And it's not like there aren't third-party products for Pathfinder. There are loads. If you're a Pathfinder player, go check out Pathfinder Infinite. It's amazing. My point is more that the size of the community dictates the size of community support and community products. The volume of third-party products are indicative of how popular a game is and how much people want to design for it. Hell, Skyrim is a great example. It was a hugely popular game. People loved it. It had flaws, God knows it had flaws, but it had a huge community that built stuff for it. But if Skyrim had been a bad game at its time, that community would never have existed to care enough about Skyrim to build the little tweaks. Community size dictates community support. You might then deflate and say, how greedy of all those designers to be thinking only about money. Well, if picking between making a third-party D&D product and a third-party product for a lesser-known RPG is the difference between paying rent or going broke, it's not malice, it's just trying to make a living. Same for indie RPGs. They're going a whole different route than the giants. For any smaller RPG these days, in order for them to succeed, it needs to fit into a small book. That way, they can advertise how easy it is to learn, how simple it is to play, and how quickly you can understand the rules. And, most importantly, how cheap it is. Because they are really up against it. The competition is fierce. Those indie RPG designers are trying their hardest to get their work out there. And there was a time when shops like DM's Guild were so vibrant, anyone could make money posting there and building a reputation off of it. Like Justin Armand, Taran Pounds, James Introcaso, or dozens of other designers whose work you'd be familiar with. You should go check out Trakirus' video on what happened to the DM's Guild. It's a sad story. Now, every indie RPG designer has to be an influencer as well. At least these days. Vagabond is amazing, but I never would have heard of it without Indestructo Boy. Nimble has Evans, Shadowdark has the Arcane Library and Kelsey Dion, Draw Steel has Matt Colville and MCDM, Daggerheart has Critical Role. It doesn't matter how good the thing you make is if nobody sees it. The only way to get your word out there these days is by being something of an influencer. So if you're an aspiring RPG designer, you're looking at a very online world full of very online people who won't get a chance to hear about your amazing designs otherwise. And that's something that's always forgotten in discussions about this space, this hobby, and really any space anywhere. There is, wherever you look, a stark gap between what us, very online people think, see, and hear compared to the average person or average RPG player. You know, I know about all these amazing games because I'm online, talking to other nerds, watching videos. I am very online. But most of my players aren't. They love playing, they think about their characters outside the game, they get deep into roleplay, they understand the mechanics of their characters. By every metric, they are amazing players. But they don't know these folks designing those awesome games. I do. They don't. Those not online players know D&D. And for a few years now, D&D has been taking them for granted. But as the very online interest in D&D wanes, it risks slowly upending the support structures that keep that specific game alive, and maybe even the hobby. Because our hobby, like it or not, tends to mostly grow through people learning about D&D before they funnel into more niche games. It's kind of like the top of a reverse funnel. 90% of players never funnel down, but many do. And that's what lets people like me make a living because they support us on Patreon, and as a result I get to, hopefully, add some value back to the hobby with videos for new DMs. We'll be doing one of those next week. But I think that's why it comes down to communication. We've been working on my own setting now for a while, making PDFs about it on the Patreon and putting it up. It's called the Broadsheets. We make monsters, subclasses, and adventures. And I bring it up because, in my opinion, the most recent batch of D&D news is heavily colored by what I've learned while self-publishing RPG stuff on the internet. And it's not a complicated lesson. It seems so obvious in retrospect. Basically, the more I talk about the stuff I'm making, and why I make it the way I make it, the more people go check it out because they're excited by it. Me talking about it makes some people excited. And if I make something and I stick it on Patreon and I never mention it in the video, well, nobody seems to notice. Even if we've got a bunch of patrons who should have seen it, they might not. And really, in order for my game design to go anywhere, I need to talk about it. I need to advertise it, which sounds sort of oddly businessy, but all that really means is giving those very online RPG nerds a thing they might fall in love with. Many won't care, but some will. And when they do, that makes my day. That's the best thing in the world. But it doesn't happen if I don't tell them why I fell in love. Love is contagious, which is why I think it's an essential move for Greg Bilsland and Brian Perry to make the podcast rounds, to talk to the community, and to help people fall in love. Help us understand what is going on at that coast where all those wizards live. And I think it's the only way D&D remains relevant. So I think this latest bout of interviews was amazing. The challenge for the D&D team is whether or not they can keep it up throughout the year, through their release schedule for the rest of the year. And of course, whether those releases manage to make people fall in love, which at the moment, I'll be honest, seems like an uphill battle. I don't know that I need a third Ravenloft book for 5th edition, but I remain cautiously optimistic. Anyway, that's some of my commentary on what's happening these days in the hobby. I'm not trying to lick any WotC boots or whatever nonsense. People will be commenting on that below, but I'm just trying to add a bit of commentary and nuance in a space so often dominated by sound bites. So I don't know, do with it what you will. Remember, corporations aren't your friend, but this is a corporation that hires artists, both people who draw the game and game designers, and they make things and then they sell their art. And artists are my friend. So I'm gonna keep making that distinction, and it's going to get clearer for me every time I get to hear the artists communicate with the community. For the sake of the game I love, and for the sake of those artists who are fortunate enough to get to do this for a living, both at D&D and the countless revolutionary games in this space. So let this year justify all the hope. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend.
My love for you is contagious.
Whoa, if you haven't checked out Kibbles Tasty's compendium of airships and aircrafts, go do that now before it's too late. And if you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.